sort of a long time ago now, but my recollection of that is that I came here in '92, I think, and somewhere along the line I met Kirsten, and then I met Di. I think I met Di Shepherd through Kirsten Coates, and somewhere along the line we just had this conversation about, wouldn't this be a great place to hold a folk festival? That would be a cool thing to do. And I can't say that I can remember the exact moment when we had that conversation, but that was what we said. And somehow or other we ended up having a meeting. So I think we went to the Top Pub, is my memory of it, and with Kirsten and Di and Carlisle. We sat around, we talked about it. There was no committee at that stage. Obviously, there was no folk festival really, but we sort of tossed the idea around, and then some other people got involved as well. Like we must have put out a message to see if anybody else wanted to get involved, and I remember Dale McNeil was a young guy who was around at the time living here and a musician, and he was interested. So I remember Dale coming along to one of those meetings, and yeah, we just sort of developed the idea. And some of us had been to folk festivals before, like I'd been to Port Fairy a few years before coming here. Thought it was fabulous, had a great time. I wouldn't say that I was like a person who went to folk festivals all the time, but I'd been to that one. I think just the historic kind of streetscape and all that stuff would lend itself to the festival. What I do remember, it was an afternoon, and it was just, I think, on the Saturday, so it wasn't even, there weren't events scheduled over the 2 days of the weekend. It was, I think, pretty much a one-day event, as I remember it. And I remember one particular artist, Deb Morrow, who's an Indigenous singer, songwriter, who came and she played in the front room at the Top Pub. I remember either the first year or the second year, we had some market stalls and we had to clear the streets, and we sort of there were cars everywhere, and we thought, well, how are we going to do this? So Rod, who was the policeman at the time, was around, and so I talked to him about it. I got into the front seat of the police car with him, and we drove slowly down the main street, and he put his loudspeaker thing on, and and I got the microphone, and I just said, can you move your cars, please, because we've got this event happening. So that was funny. So there's some of the things that I remember about it, yeah. And I don't recall, but there would have maybe been 3 or 4 artists on the program, I think, at that stage. I do remember one year, and whether it was the second or third year, we sort of started to distribute events into different locations. So we had one up at John Dermer's pottery, in the garden at his pottery studio, with the band Barn Tray was the act, and so we took it up there. I think it was a Sunday morning. It was absolutely beautiful, gorgeous setting. There might have only been 20 people there, I don't know. But we kind of got there, and they had all this sound equipment, and I was pretty naive about all this sort of stuff. So all of a sudden they arrived with the gear, and we were, like 10 minutes before the show, and we had to kind of set this thing up. And so it was a bit of a mad rush, and there was a bit of angst about it. But anyway, they were great. They got going and did a great show. And so it was probably only a couple of years. And then we started having things in the hall on Friday night, and one that I remember as a really good one was when we had Rory McLeod, and that was again pretty early in the piece, I think, on a Friday night. And again, like, there wasn't a huge crowd there. There might have been somewhere between 50 and 100 people, I guess, but it was a pretty amazing show. It was great. I remember we got a lot of help and a lot of support from the Shire, actually, from their what's the position called? It was like a cultural development or a tourist development position, and David Shermer was the guy who was doing that job at the time. And David would just come all the time to our meetings, which were after hours in the evenings and stuff like that, and David was always there providing a whole lot of really good advice and support, and in a whole lot of different ways. So that was really, really helpful. And that went on for a number of years. It probably stems back to to those early days in some ways, because I think, Kirsten, Di, Karen, and I guess myself and others as well were sort of always really conscious of getting different parts of the community to kind of participate and have kind of like buy-in, I suppose, to use a project management jargon or whatever, but into the whole thing. So, the school pretty early on got on board with the markets and things like that, and the kindergarten was in there, and so there was always that, I think, right from pretty much from the start, let's get, if you give everybody something to do and something to gain from doing it, fundraising or whatever, then, you get everybody involved that way. So I think it was just a good, sound, sort of like a community development model, if you like. I don't know, I mean, it's a big fundraiser for the school, in the order of, I don't know what it is these days, but, it's about 10 grand a year worth of fundraising, I think, for them. I always think it's amazing the way that the school does the community dinner in the gardens as well. And I can't exactly remember how that sort of got to be their job or whatever, but that is amazing, the amount of effort that goes into that, and the planning and the logistics of cooking, hundreds and hundreds of meals and pulling it all together. Yeah. And a credit to everybody, and a credit to some great facilitators. Like in the committee over the years, we've had presidents and chair people who've been able to kind of manage tensions in the group and, solve those problems when they come up. So Helen McGowan stands out for me in particular as somebody who was really, really skilled at doing that. But, there's plenty of others as well. So we always had a mix of local and international and national artists. This guy called Jack the Whipper, who used to come up down from Corryong or somewhere, and Jack would kind of, I don't know if he was ever part of the program as such, but he would come along and he'd bring in a collection of whips, and just sort of impromptu, he'd set himself up somewhere, and just start sort of cracking these whips, and but we kind of got a bit alarmed about it at certain times, because from an OH&S perspective, there wasn't always a clear boundary between where Jack was cracking the whips and where the audience would be standing around watching. No, there was always a bit of a debate. Every year you'd have a debate. How many people do you reckon we got? I don't know, 5,000, 10,000. Estimates varied. You'd know how many tickets you sold, obviously, but there was always the punters that would come out, especially on the Sunday, and you'd look up and down the street and it'd be, chockers. And it's been that way for quite a long time, and nobody really ever knew how many people there were, but always lots and lots of people. And I love the main street, the way there's always people just sort of playing music, and outside the pubs there'd be people there, and just a really good vibe, for people having fun, and people of all ages, all backgrounds. That's what I really like about it. It just, it brings people together, and there's just always a really good feel about it. So somewhere along the line, we thought about a buskers competition, because there'd be people that would show up just for the festival who were, obviously also musicians, but they weren't on the program, and they'd always be looking for a chance to just get together and play, and sometimes that would happen in the pub, sessions and things like that, and sometimes they'd be just wanting to set up in the street. So we kind of thought, well, I guess we can facilitate some street entertainment really by encouraging people to do that, and kind of managing it in a way by having a buskers competition and having allocated spots in the street where people could do the busking, making sure that they didn't, over amplify and drown other people out, all that sort of stuff. So we started doing that, and John Donnelly and I were the ones who ran the competition and judged the artists, which is kind of funny because neither of us are musicians or really performers in any sense of the word, although John is a very funny guy and tells a great story. And so we used to do that, and we'd get kids, little tiny kids, and people who'd never performed before would come out and have a go, and we'd always try and be really encouraging. And I can remember when Richard Perso kind of started, and as I think about a 12 or 13 year old, and pretty shy, and then he would come back and do it again next year, and he'd do it again next year, and then I think the third time I saw him, he went from this shy guy to playing John Butler's song Ocean, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You know, I couldn't. In that 12-month period, I reckon Richard didn't do anything else except just play his guitar, and he just develops just incredibly. So I always used to enjoy getting up on the truck stage and kind of emceeing all those free acts that would get up on the truck stage, and then the buskers who we judged to be the winners of the competition would be invited up as the last act on the Sunday afternoon to perform on the stage, and that was like some of those people had never been on a stage before, and that was always a bit of a thrill, giving them a chance to do that. And Lisa Miller, came, did some performances that way as well. And I remember one year Ryan, my son Ryan, who was about 4 at the time, just kind of wandered up onto the stage and stood next to me while I was announcing the next act or something, and that was fun too. So just heaps of fun memories, and times in the pub on a Saturday night or something when it's kind of all over. Well, it's not all over because you've got to get up and do it again the next day, so you're kind of wrecked, but you're kind of on a bit of, you're pretty euphoric at the same time. And because I guess we've always had like a really broad definition about folk music. It was never just sort of traditional Australian folk tunes or anything like that. There was always world music to some degree, and other sort of musical traditions as well. A bit of blues and roots and that kind of stuff, and really just non-mainstream, non-commercial music of all sorts. And so I think for a lot of people it's kind of opened their mind. There's a world of people who are making great music, and you'll never hear them on mainstream radio, and yet they're travelling around all the time, just doing these amazing things and giving people fantastic experiences, telling stories and just really heartwarming stuff, and connecting people and making political statements and all that kind of stuff as well. So I think it has opened people in this town towards that kind of stuff. I don't know, just I guess having the idea, like being part of that small group of people who thought, here's a good idea, and having the motivation to see it through. And I'm really glad to have been part of that, and I've probably met a lot of people in the community from having been part of that, because there's somebody who works in town and I'm not here from 9 to 5 on Monday to Friday, I'm at my work. But being involved in the folk festival, I got to meet just heaps of people that I maybe otherwise wouldn't have met. So yeah, having the idea, and then with those other people being able to develop the idea into reality, and learning probably a whole lot of things along the way about how to do that, and that world of folk music, and just meeting a lot of people that, like I said, maybe I wouldn't have otherwise met around the town, just through being involved that way. It's been really satisfying, and probably just the overall way that I think that it shapes the town and the kind of place that it is now, and I'm glad that I had some part in that as well. So yeah, been good.